Hi, welcome to Christine's Corner. Today we are on a serious note. We're going to be talking about domestic violence, but from surviving to being a thriver now. So I hope that there's someone out there that this will help one of our stories, or maybe all will help you. Or if maybe you know someone in your family or friends that you can pass this on to too. My first question will be for around the table would be, how did you survive? How'd you come from victim to being a thriver now? We'll start with you, Joanne.
For me, it was a lot of therapy, speaking therapy, but also a lot of journaling. I like to write my thoughts, my feelings, my expressions, and that was a real life-giving force for me. Sometimes I would write pages and pages and pages and just let my whole heart come out on the paper, and then I could see what I was feeling.
Right.
Does that make sense? I could see what I was feeling in a way.
Absolutely.
It made it more concrete.
Did you go back and read it?
Many times I did. Yep.
Like
a
later,
few days later,
how you
3 weeks later,
yeah.
2 months later, to see how much I had progressed in my healing process. And that was very healing in itself.
Were there other things that help you besides the journaling?
Oh, so many things. Family, prayer, different programs that I've been through. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many. To me, healing wasn't just one-dimensional. It was many dimensions in many different ways, which kind of brought about the whole healing process for me. I don't think I could have just done it one way.
And how about you, Lynn?
It's funny you say writing. Writing is definitely a big thing, but my journey wasn't multi-dimensional, I think, as much as yours. It was a lot of prayer, a lot of sitting still, trying to keep the emotions from bleeding over.
Yes.
And just trying to manage how to get through that day without, I don't want to say without falling apart, but just how to get through a day at a time. Breathing, consciously breathing.
Right, right.
And just simple things like maybe watching a movie that brought me a smile, or a piece of music that didn't make me cry, or if it did make me cry, I knew it beforehand.
Yeah.
So I was going to allow that bit to come out slowly and then deal with it that way. So.
And how about you, Suzie?
So for me, it was like 3 distinct stages. The first one, after being in a relationship for 9 years that was abusive, realizing that that's what I was in. Being able to label it, identify it, because I didn't know. I was either in denial or I just didn't know anything about domestic violence. So going with somebody to Interval House, the local organization in the Hartford area, hearing other women in the share group, finding out what it is. It is domestic violence and I'm in this relationship. That was one thing. Then surrounding myself with people, groups, support. This wonderful woman, Susan O'Million, has the My Avenging Angel program. I was referred to her by Interval House. Life-changing for me. The exercises we did, the self-reflection, going deep inside, sort of pulling your life apart and putting it back together in a much more positive and confident way.
Yes.
But then the third piece for me was crucial. At that moment, at age 40, I decided to go back to school. I was determined to educate myself out of this mess. I had 6 credits to my name. I went back to get my associate's degree. Every class I took had to do with figuring out who I was as a person. All those classes led to a transfer to UConn. I got a bachelor's degree in general science with a focus on human services. I had no idea what I was going to do.
Good for
but
you.
Those classes helped me get to figure out who I am, and then they propelled me to the next stage, which is truly thriving.
Yes. Congratulations to all of you there. Yes,
Yeah.
and we've all
Heck of a journey.
healing
So
and
see you,
journey.
by the way.
Yes,
Been a
it's so
while.
good to you too. I myself have been through it through many, starting as my parents, and then going to 2 abusive relationships. and thinking also that, what they're doing, this is this part of being married, and you're just not doing enough. So you keep trying to fix it and trying to help, and you're being told you're not doing it right, and why are you doing that? Why you do this and this day, and the next day it's completely different. So what do you do? And you don't have anyone to talk to. They seem to isolate you from talking to anyone else, or assuming that they don't know what you're. No one's going to believe you. So I've had much therapy. I was afraid of journaling, although eventually I did journal here and there. I ended up burning it at the cemetery at my mom's, all the papers that I did, and it was such a relief and therapeutic. I was so afraid of somebody seeing it because that has happened in the past. But yeah, I've had much therapy, and EMDR. I don't know if anyone has heard of the EMDR.
I've had it done to me, yes.
Yeah, it was.
It's a way to begin to focus in on what the issue in your life is, and then to begin to take it apart from different parts of your brain. So there's usually my therapist would do either sound therapy, so it would go from one ear to the other. I have a little thing on, and it would kind of bring you in the middle between your left brain and right brain, which was kind of cool because your right brain is so emotional and so all this stuff, and your left brain is so rigid and didactic, and what's where the inner critic lives, and you find that little spot in the middle, that neutral spot, and you're like, oh, I could sit there for a while.
Yeah.
Grounding.
Yeah, and it's sort of like there I can deal with all this stuff. It's not too emotional, it's not too rigid, but it's this little space in between. And I can't remember, it's emotional something, EMDR. And then I also had therapists would do it with light.
Yeah, each one is different.
Yeah.
You can also use electric pods.
Yeah. Just some
Another
way
one,
that
just
those-
so the finger back and forth.
Yeah.
But it was a great relief, because every time we go back at what that incident or sexual abuse or whatever happened to you, it wasn't as bad. It's never going to go away, but at least it diminishing it, and you've gone through it with someone. And me as well. I've gone to Susan's workshop. This is Susan O'Million.
Several times.
Several
I think
times.
More than once.
Yeah, I've helped other people, brought them to your workshops and gone through it with them. And they thanked me for being there. That's a great program that you have, and several workbooks you have.
And several of you have writing. The other thing I'd say about your journey, because I have watched it for, 15 years or something, Christine?
Yeah.
Painting, art was a big thing for you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I remember when we first went to the retreats, and it was really hard for you to sort of contain, well, it was beautiful, first of all, the beautiful landscape. And then Christine would say to me, can I just go sit out by the beach and paint? It's like, yeah. And then she'd come back with this painting that was, I think it was a painting, but it was also a whole lot of emotional stuff.
Yeah, that's what you learn. And I went to art. I as well as you did, went to school.
Yep.
And I thought, I was so nervous. I could hardly sleep the next morning. I was going to college. I signed up for college, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm so old, I'm stupid. You're told you're stupid and you're not going to do it. And then my history of all classes, history, one of my favorite subjects, said, how long are you going to be here? And I said, well, it depends on if I pass this semester or not, or even make it through it. And I ended up making the dean's list.
Yeah.
So
That's amazing.
It's so rewarding.
yeah.
Each little bit of confidence builds on the other one, and
Right.
you're on your way.
So they went further, and I got my associate's and my bachelor's. Yep. So.
I remember that. I remember going to graduation. Yeah.
So is there other things you want to mention that have helped you from being a thriver as you are now and helping others?
Helping in the journey, you mean? Or
Helping you in the journey.
One thing that's helped me is I have a sister that I'm very, very close to. and she was a tremendous help. She would love me no matter what I was blurting out about our family. I was abused by my brother and some other people, but she was always just so loving and always understanding. No matter what I said, I knew I could be safe with her, and that was really just heartwarming for me and safe for me. And since then, I have grown a great deal, and in turn, she needed to do a great deal of growth in her life. So then I was there
helped
for
each other.
her.
Yeah.
Right. So it was
like
just
so
an amazing
rewarding.
journey for both of us, because she had an abusive husband.
Oh.
And I didn't know it at the time I was going through my stuff, but then it came out later because she felt strong enough. Because of my story, she felt strong enough to go through her journey.
Yes.
And I was there to support her.
Yes.
So we are both now very strong women, and very happy women.
Yes, we're all strong women. You
Yes.
find out that you are strong. You think
Right.
you're weak because you're told you're weak.
Right.
But
Well,
we are
the-
very strong
right.
to go through what we go through.
Right.
The word
I think that
that's-
was, I'm sorry, Susan, part of going to Susan's group was meeting other people. And that said,
Yeah.
oh, there's other people out there. It wasn't just me.
Well, it's also a community that we've built, women coming through the workshops of thrivers, not just, I mean, I know a lot of the women that come through my workshop are just kind of happy to find another word because it took us so long. I've been doing this work for 40 years. It took us long to even get to survive, to use the word survivor. And though I agree with Suzie, it's really important to identify as a victim. My niece Maggie, who was killed by her ex-boyfriend, she never identified as a victim because in the moment of her death is when she started to realize, because he had never physically assaulted her before the murder, that she had been abused, that same stuff that Suzie was talking about.
Is that why you started your workshop?
Yeah, basically, although I had done this work for many years, I'm an attorney. I used to represent women who were domestic violence cases in court for their divorces, but I was this left brain attorney. I was doing all this left brain work, and so when Maggie was killed, I suddenly was pushed into the emotional world that you guys have just described, that I was traumatized. And so I couldn't do that left brain work anymore, at least not with women. Every woman in the shelter was Maggie, and I couldn't engage with them in a way that was helpful to them. I was like sobbing, you know. It was like,
Yeah,
you know, hard. So I thought, okay, can't do that. Let's see what else I can do. So I think for me, it was my own journey to figure out, okay, so I'm now a secondary victim of a crime. I'm going to survive this. You know, there's no way I'm not going to. The person that killed my niece is not going to take that away from me too. But then what was this thing that I was going to do, and how was I going to describe it? And I think that having done these, and Suzie was in one of my very first workshops.
17, 18 years ago?
Yeah,
Wow.
something like
Wow.
that. And I remember you coming, I don't know if you remember this, but she's like, well, how do you know, what's your credential? because you were in a pretty bad, I mean, you were hanging in there, but you were in a pretty bad place. And I'm like, well, I'm an attorney, you know. and I used to like practice law with women who've been abused, and I get this issue. And she's like, okay, but, you know.
But what you do is give back, and I think going from survivor to thriver, a big piece of that is being able to give back, like you helping your sister,
Right.
like me being the facilitator for a share group of women for Interval House, then going and getting my master's degree with a focus on domestic violence, teaching the Batterer Intervention Program. That is coming full circle with your recovery, right?
Right, and that's also what I decided to do, is start working with the men who were abusers. So Suzie and I know how difficult that journey is, although some of them get it and some of them don't. But I think, you know, the question you asked Christine about what was one of the things, I mean, I was writing all those things down, and a lot of them were stuff that I'm a writer, but I never saw myself as a healer. But what I got was passion about it. You know, if I can do something, I can't do anything for Maggie, but I can do something for the other women that I meet. And that passion has just
propelled me. And I think, and I see that more now. My niece was murdered in 1999. It was right after Columbine. So it was just when people started to get, recognition of something really bad's going to happen to you. Someone's going to shoot somebody, something. Today we have it almost every week.
Yeah.
But I think we're getting more the idea that if something bad happens to you, you're going to have to grieve that, and you're going to have to go inside and figure it out. But you also want to keep moving. And how can you transfer that grief and that anger and that sadness into something that's really constructive?
Well, domestic violence is just so all-encompassing.
Right.
It's like a whole shroud over your entire life, right?
Yeah.
I can remember one of the things I wrote in your group was stepping out of the ashes and like pulling the casing off,
Right.
and then a rebirth almost, and replacing those fears, that anxiety, the trauma with really good experiences and growth, and then you emerge as somebody so much more.
Well, and it's a life of purpose, and maybe I didn't want to have this happen to my niece to get here, but I didn't have any control over what happened to her. Although I feel I have some guilt about it. I had all this information and I didn't give it to her, but that's kind of nebulous in a way. What's more tangible for me is what I can do. The word I've been playing with a lot and has been coming up in talking about trauma today. There's a lot more discussion about trauma actually in our society too. Maybe because there's more trauma, but more of a discussion is resilience. So what is that? Resilience to me, by dictionary definition, is the ability for somebody to bounce back quickly. Now, the word quickly might be time limited,
Up for interpretation.
but up for that's your own thing. But maybe for some people it's their lifetime, and that's fine. But you do bound. It's kind of like the rubber band that gets stretched and that always comes back.
Right.
And so some of us, and I think that's what you were talking about, Christine. Some of us are strong,
Right.
maybe stronger, but we've got a core that's been untouched. So how do we make that little? I think you talked little ember keep like. So if the abuse sort of trounces you down and gets you down to a little ember rather than a fire, let's get that fire going again.
Well, for me, I did these TV shows, and my first one
outlet.
was Beyond Violence, it was called.
I was on that show.
Remember
Yes.
that? And then we had a panel discussion about the questions about hold my child or something.
Yep, I remember that.
And that was very therapeutic for me.
Yep.
And it brought the programs of the Interval House and.
You know what else I found therapeutic was when I first found Susan's workshop, broadening the term of domestic violence. Because I grew up with domestic violence being the boyfriend or the husband, the man beating his wife.
Right.
And it,
Not between
brother,
friends,
another,
it
could be anybody within the
boyfriend,
home.
girlfriend.
And so many
Girlfriend,
more
girlfriend.
people did not, as the years went by, I found many more people who had to rethink what the term domestic violence means,
Right.
which allowed them a space to find workshops like Susan where you could go and someone says, how did you feel, what happened? And then when you have to verbalize for the first time to a group of women something that happened,
That's so personal.
I still get a
Yes.
lump in my throat,
Yeah.
and 14 years later, but it's such an opening to healing for the soul, and without it, the word safe really comes to mind. Because without it, if you're going to be judged for what happened, or you're going to be grilled
Right.
like on like we were talking
Do I
earlier in
dare
the court
say?
system, you're defending your position.
And the stigma publicly
Terribly.
too. If
Yes.
you have been
Terribly.
through this,
It's still there.
the question is, what's wrong with you?
What did you do?
What did you do
Did you deserve
right.
being raped or being
Right.
abused? It must have been you, because
Yeah.
that was back then. It must have been you.
I think what you're describing is that journey, and we all come at it. Now we'll use the word family violence a little bit broader, but the impact is the same.
Yeah.
And particularly if you're a child, it may be even more imprinted on you, and will cause you to have health outcomes that you wouldn't otherwise have. But that process of having that journey, and first of all, saying that you're on a journey. A lot of women come to my workshop like, "I'm on a journey. Nobody told me I was on a journey."
Right.
And the other thing that they love to hear, Jenny was one and people that she came to the workshop and she's like, just tell me I'm going to be okay. You know? And I said,
Tell
yes.
them you're
And-
going to be
yeah,
okay.
yeah. And I
You're gonna
said,
be
yes,
okay.
you are. And she's
Yeah.
like, well, thank you.
Yeah,
You're the
yeah.
first person that told me that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't know how you're going to take that journey. And if you know Jenny, she has taken the journey. But yeah, you know, and nobody should take that away from you.
Yeah,
No matter what.
no.
Like,
And we each use different venues, like with Jenny was her running and me
Yeah,
with
she
my
got into
art
running,
and my
yep.
the media. I mean, and talking to other people, maybe it's art or music, you know, singing.
Yep.
However it is that gets you through it. And sometimes you go 3 steps forward and 4 steps back. Like you said, it's a journey. So, or two forward, 1 back. You know,
And sometimes it's like it's four forward
or 3 back, and 3 back,
But
or
didn't I go through this?
or you're stuck
Yeah.
in quicksand and not going
Yeah.
anywhere. You know,
Yeah.
that's happened.
So the other thing
a
I'm
lot.
going to say, that Suzie said, is that it's really important to have the programs like the domestic violence program, Interval House, which is a domestic violence safe house, and a counseling program, and the sexual assault interventions and child abuse. But I think we also, our goal is more than just getting women out. It's to keep us moving, and that's why I do these free workshops. I have a nonprofit, CT Alive. Christine's been on the board that supports that, and women come to me and say, "These are not. I've never heard of this before. I didn't think it was there." I have workshops coming up
They
this
think
weekend.
it's their fault, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And I don't
And
make
it's
people
private, too. It's so hard to
and I don't,
tell it.
Right, and
Yeah.
I don't have people tell me their story. I make sure they're safe, because then you start telling the story, then we all sort of start triggering, and I start triggering,
Yeah.
and we don't get anywhere.
Right.
But it's important to have told that story and to make sure you're safe. And I think more and more, I just was at a conference in San Diego last month, and I met 3 of the young women from Parkland School, the Parkland School down in Florida where the shooting took place.
Wow.
And oh my God, they were just, I just got so inspired by them, because they're like, you know, and they were 15, 16, and 17 years old. And they are on a mission now.
That's good.
And
That's good.
That's power, yeah.
That's good. There's so many programs. So if you look in your town, or just call 211, and you can get programs for domestic violence or where to go. Programs such as Susan and the ones you've just met, where you have violence in the schools. So call those. We have about 3 minutes left. So if anybody wants to add, now would be the time.
I think one of your questions were like, what are you going to go, now that we've reached this thriver?
Where are we going
You
from
know,
there?
yeah. So I'm so excited at the position I'm in. 17 years ago, I never, ever would have dreamt that I would become a CEO of an association of realtors.
No, wow.
That's awesome.
That is.
And I'm really thriving. But if you were to ask me, what am I going to do next? My kids are 25 and 22. They've gone through college or not. You know, we're at the point where I want to see them really self-actualize as fully functioning human beings, and that's my goal.
Yeah,
That they
the
just
children.
launch and be great people, and they already
Absolutely.
are. So.
Yeah.
That's so amazing to hear that they're 22 and 25.
Yeah, mine are in their 30s.
Yeah,
it's gonna be-
so that's breaking the cycle too, breaking the cycle of
Yes.
generation
Yes,
is really
generation to
important.
generation.
And to show your kids, no matter what happened to you.
And
that-
granddaughters. I have 3
Yeah,
granddaughters.
Right, you guys
Yeah,
are
that's
Just
true.
telling Lynn,
Yeah,
that's
I
my
do.
mission, that they are going to be strong women.
Well,
Yeah.
so remember my workshops are called My Avenging Angel Workshops, myavengingangel.com. Living well is our best revenge.
Yes.
right.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
That's what you guys
Amen.
just
It gets
we
me
just
through
spent
it.
last
A lot
10
of
minutes talking
be
about it.
well. Thank you for tuning in to Christine's Corner, and I'm so glad you came. I hope this wasn't too much for you, but it is a lot to take in. But we all need to hear this. It needs to be out there and out in the media, because no one's going to hand you a pamphlet or phone numbers when you're stuck inside, isolated in your house. And you say, well, what can I do? How can I help? So call 211. There are a lot of ways that you can help.
Make it a story of courage and hope.
Right, and strength, yes, because you have it. So thank you very much for coming.